Hello, this is Ryan with Dr. Stephen Lowe for another episode of AdamRevival. And today we got a special one. We're doing a little bit of collaboration. Right now I've got Caleb Bell and Jamie Kent from an organization called No More. And we're going to get to learn a little bit about what they do and, how it kind of relates to men's issues when it comes to faith and, being the godly men of Christ that we should be. So let's get a little bit into introductions here. Tell me a little bit about what is No More, and then maybe a little bit about your guys' story.
Sure. I guess I'll start and I'll let Caleb introduce himself. But again, grateful to be here with you guys. It's a pleasure to be on having a conversation about a very important topic. No More has been around for coming up on 13 years in July. And our vision is a world where every child finds a loving home, where survivors of human trafficking find unwavering support and shelter, and where the impoverished, both materially and spiritually, experience the boundless love of Christ. We are a faith-based organization, and it's important for us that we have Jesus at the center of everything we do. So our mission is simple: is we want to move more than a million, but we want to move people to action to serve the poor, orphans, human trafficking victims. We respond to that connection between poverty, vulnerability, and exploitation through training, outreach, and storytelling events. And here's how I like to say it. No More exists to connect people to care for the least of these. Jesus said in Matthew 25, whatever you did to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And so my favorite words in that scripture are these and mine, because Jesus made it personal. And he invites us into that same idea to make it personal, to care for the people in our community. And we do that through awareness, education, and mobilization. So we truly believe that community transformation is found at the intersection where awareness and mobilization meet. And so we have a lot of opportunities to help educate people. One of the reasons why Caleb Bell is on our team, helping do that, and then helping people take their next right step and doing something to care for those who are most vulnerable in our communities. That's a little bit.
Very good.
I can give you my
Very
personal
good.
story in a minute.
That's
Just a little bit.
Very beautiful. So Caleb, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And
Yeah. So I'm Caleb Bell, and I'm the anti-trafficking specialist for No More. Prior to being in this role, I actually used to serve in the 75th Ranger Regiment, which is a special operations unit within the U.S. Army. And so when I was about to transition out of that, that's how I was planning on moving down to Tampa, and I wanted to volunteer in some way, shape, or form in the anti-trafficking space. And so I got connected with an amazing woman named Dottie Skipper, who's a big part of fighting human trafficking down here in Florida. And she got me connected to Jamie. And so I originally just started volunteering with them. Public speaking, again, a lot of training with another No More coworker named Kate. And so we travel around the Tampa Bay area, public speaking in small businesses, even government in St. Pete, Clearwater. We're in schools, just training everyone that we can. And then I ended up joining part-time in the fall of this past year. So.
Great. And he decided to go back to school to get his master's degree. So
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
where are you going to school at?
Going to USF for my MBA.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Just very quickly, very honorable what you both are doing and what your organization stands for, and we are super honored to have you guys on AdamRevival, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. We need the foot soldiers, the hands and feet of Christ out there getting in the mud, getting dirty, and defending those that cannot defend themselves. So just good on you guys. God bless you guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely thank you for getting on here with us to talk to us. So Steve and I feel very passionately about this issue that, it's a lot of people view it as kind of a woman's issue, but, at the end of the day, we know as men of faith that, men have a instinctive leadership role in our families, in our homes, in our communities. So, if there's a underlying rot in society from a moral standpoint, it starts at the top, and that starts with men leading the home.
Agreed. So Jamie, why don't you go ahead and give us a little personal background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Just to add a little bit of what Ryan just said for a second. I couldn't agree with that more. That men are called to lead, and that we should be doing that. And quite honestly, Caleb and I are kind of anomalies in the space of anti-trafficking. There's not a lot of men in this space. There's a lot of women fighting for other women, and so it is a predominantly female population that's serving, which I don't disagree with. I think that's a good thing, but I do think that men need to step up to the plate and start making this personal as well. And human trafficking really is a simple economics issue. It's a supply and demand issue. If we can dry up the demand, then the supply will also follow suit. And so, some of that has to do with simple the lust of the flesh, I guess you could say. I mean, men typically struggle with things like pornography, and so this is something that has to be talked about in public forums, and it needs to be addressed, not from a standpoint of shame, but a standpoint of hope. Like there is hope to overcome things like this, and so that's an important factor. And the reason why I'm so passionate about an issue like human trafficking, and I'll go back and say we focus on foster care, human trafficking, poverty issues. Why? Because these things are not independent of each other, but rather they're interdependent on each other. Where you find poverty, you find children that are displaced from homes, you can find people that are desperate, and there's human trafficking, the sale of human beings. All of this is it's intertwined, and my story is very much connected to that. What's that?
Go ahead. Yep, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I had a thought. We'll get back.
No, I was just going to say my story is very much connected to the interconnectedness to all of these things. When I was 10 years old, I was removed from my home because of abuse that was at the hands of my stepfather. My stepfather was physically abusing myself, my brother, and my sister. But then on top of that, he was sexually abusing my sister, who finally came out and voiced what was going on. And so it was one of those abrupt kind of moments where it's in the middle of the night, cops show up banging on the door, and there's all kinds of commotion. I'm given a black trash bag, told to pack my things, and there you have it. I was in a small Midwest town, and then before I knew it, I was put in the back of a car and sent into the city to live with people I'd never met before. Once my mom got us back, she did the very best she could. I love my mom dearly. And yet she was a woman of very little means, and she just worked at the mall. And she did the best that she could to take care of her kids. But sometimes we just lived in what would be classified now as like Section 8 housing. Sometimes we lived with my sister's boyfriends who were drug addicts, and then also selling her. And so I got to watch it in real time, human trafficking take place before that was even a term. And so I just saw the gravity of this, and I lived it myself. And I said, this can't be, especially when I came to faith as in my teen years. I said, there's got to be a better way for the church to respond to these types of things. Yeah. And so I've dedicated my life to that battle cry: no more, not on our watch. And so it's been a journey, but I'll tell you the hope that we found in Christ. I was the first one to come to faith in Jesus when I was in high school, but surely and slowly, every single person in my family, my immediate family, my father and my mother, who divorced when I was a year old, both came to Jesus. My brother came to Christ, and so did my sister, who experienced tremendous amount of abuse. All of them are living testimonies. They're incredible people, and I'm very proud to call them my family.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is a blessing. And it's hard to say, and a lot of people don't understand what I mean by that. But it is a blessing, the things that you went through, because of what you are doing in life, because you are listening and obeying to God's purpose on your life. You can view those things through an objective lens and put them to good use, right? And
No
do
doubt.
your best to help those that might be in a similar condition, that might be headed into a similar condition. We live in a society now where there's a lot of victim type of mentality, right? And this kind of gets back to what we were discussing about men and bolstering men back to leadership through Christ. Look, we could all play the victim mentality, right?
Yeah.
But
Sure.
with Christ, we're enabled to look back at very difficult, very tragic, and very sorrowful times, just as you went through and your family went through, and put those things to good. Right? We can
That's
use
right.
those. We can use those as weapons against the enemy, and all glory to God for that. Without Christ, you just couldn't do it. You just couldn't
Yeah.
do it. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes. You made me think of a scripture, and I paraphrase it, but it's that the enemy intends everything for evil, but God turns for good. And
Yeah.
so I'm like you, Dr. Stephen. I look back on my life, and I'm very grateful for it. I don't regret any of it. And so it is. You're absolutely right. It's made me who I am. It's given me the passion to do what I do, and it's what I'll spend the rest of my life doing.
So I want to touch base. So you kind of laid out where the nest of these issues kind of is, right? And it's a lot of it, from what I took and understood, would be socioeconomic conditions, impoverished areas, drug-ridden areas, and all of those things kind of fester, right? But is there a higher entity that's outside of that, that is navigating this demand and orchestrating human trafficking at like a macro level rather than a micro level?
I'll let Caleb speak to that as one of our trainers. I'm going to
Let's
throw it to him.
Let's hear it.
So in regard to the few things like socioeconomic and stuff, there's a lot of vulnerabilities, we like to say, that can make someone, again, be vulnerable to a situation of being a victim of human trafficking. Foster care system, that's a big one. I know that the statistic, at least right now, is 67% of victims of human trafficking have interacted with the foster care system at least once. So there's not much on, hey, how long were they in the foster care system, or were they in the foster care system multiple times, but we're just talking they were at some point came into contact with the foster care system.
It's quantifiable that they
67%.
Okay,
That's
67%.
a crazy stat to think of. So that's one of those vulnerabilities, and you see usually it's a combination of vulnerabilities. It's not just one, but usually if they're in foster care system, they could be run away from home, just being in an unsafe neighborhood. There's a lot of things that make someone more vulnerable. So
can I don't want to. I'm not cutting you off here. I didn't want to lose the thought. Do we know the data of you said 67% of these people have passed through the foster system or have come in contact with it, been relying on it at some point? Do we know the data of human trafficking victims and single motherhood, fatherless homes?
So I don't know that. I don't know if Jamie, you know that stat off the top of your head. In regards to just an adult.
Okay.
So I know that it's in the high, either
It's got to
80s
be
or
high,
90%.
right? It's got to be high.
If a child has just one trusted adult, that again means them no harm or anything, just trusted adult looking out for them, giving them the support, love, attention that a child needs, their likelihood of being a victim of human trafficking drops dramatically.
Yeah, that makes. Makes sense.
Just one adult trusted.
That makes sense. Now, it does pose the question of, we see a lot of broken homes. Like if you look in the Black community, we see above 70% of single motherhood rates, right? And you have to wonder how much of this has to do with that condition of a fatherless home, a single mother upbringing. And look, I very much grew up with my mom, right? I'm not saying single mothers are bad by any means. What I'm saying is we can look at other statistics in other
The lack
areas.
of the lack of the leadership
The male
role
leadership,
in the household.
right? The
That's what
nuclear
you're saying.
family, as they call it.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that. I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So yeah, there is some data points, and I probably don't have them in front of me that I could point to them and speak to them like that. But there definitely is, and there's a lot of energy, even in our state here in Florida. I mean, the governor last year rolled out a whole initiative, a fatherhood initiative, where he put $70 million behind it to try to bolster dads and their responsibility to the nucleus family, to the nuclear family. So they're trying to, they see the data points, they see the disconnect between a father not being involved, and they see the data points where a father is involved. And here's how I'll frame it up. Again, in my own personal story, I told you about my mom, but what I didn't tell you is that I walked that road with my mom. We lived in every condition that you could, even in the back of a car sometimes. But it wasn't until I went and saw my dad, who was remarried, living in Georgia. Obviously, no social media existed, no cell phones at this time. So it's not like you had access to see everybody's life and what was going on. Right. My dad was sheltered from all of the tragedy that was going on in our lives until I went and saw him. And he was married, new family. And I broke down and told him what was going on. And he immediately stepped in and said, "This is not happening. You're not going back." And my dad rescued me from that environment.
Yeah.
And so I can speak to the father being engaged in your life and how much of a difference that made, because from the age of 10 to 12 was drastically different than from the age of 12 to 17. 10 to 12, I mean, I was in survival mode and I was fighting for my life. It's that old mechanism, fight or flight. And I was a fighter. I had to fight for everything. And so, but then age of 12 to 17, where I'm living with my dad, I mean, it was like, rags to riches kind of thing. I mean, he lived in a house like you did, with a nice pool in the backyard. And so it's like, my whole life.
Steve's pool's not that nice.
My father. It's not that nice. Okay. Well, mine had a diving board.
I had one. It's gone.
As a kid, I thought that was pretty cool. But I mean, like literally my dad, I mean, he was the first physical example of salvation for me. Before I even knew Jesus, before he even knew Jesus, he was like, he just stepped in and said, "Nope, this is not happening."
Jamie, you and I had a very similar road. I think we discussed that on the phone. I'm not sure. I'm not going to go into my full testimony due to time, but we had a very similar road. I was with my mom, my sister. We were abandoned for a while. We were homeless for a while. And that was from the ages of 12 to 15 years old, I'd say. My dad re-entered my life, about that time, 15 to 16. And I can say the same thing as you just said. My dad brought stability to me. He brought protection to me, understanding to me. And I attribute a lot of who I am today to that relationship with my father. Absolutely.
I do the same thing. I mean,
for men to be.
I still have my dad in my life, and I talk to him multiple times a week. He lives up in Tennessee, but I mean, he's one of my best friends.
I love Tennessee. We were just there. I just spent a week in Tennessee, and I just love it down there. It's so beautiful.
It's beautiful.
So let's get into the structure of your operation, right? Take us from ground level. Like, okay, so let's start here. What proactive measures are you guys going or have implemented to go out and search and find and begin the process of support, begin the process of healing, whatever you guys do? Let's start at the very ground level here.
Well, there's two things, and I'll let Caleb speak again to the education part. But like I said, it's education, mobilization, and in the mobilization side, we're trying to help others take their next right step in caring for vulnerable people, right? So one of the things that we've identified in the state of Florida is that being number 3 in the country for incidences of human trafficking, not a really great statistic that we'd like to tout. We just
Sure.
found out that we're number 1 in education, which is really awesome.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
that's good.
this one is not one we want to be on the top 10 list of.
Yeah.
But we are. And part of the problem is there's not enough housing and services for women who even want to get out of this lifestyle of human trafficking. I call it a lifestyle loosely. And so we said to that, we said, no, this can't be. We live in one of the richest countries in the world. Everyone should be able to have housing. And so we've made it our own personal mission to solve that problem for housing services. So specifically women that need services, we wanted to make sure they have a place to lay their head every night so they can get the services they need and be rehabilitated and redeemed and restored back to the person they were called to be by God. And so they can go back into society and be a productive citizen. And so it's one of the things that we've committed to is solving some of the housing. Now, the way we're doing that, we're doing it both through private funding and through grant funding. So we access grant dollars to help us secure the cost that it takes to serve the women, the programming services, which is not cheap because obviously these women have a lot of needs from medical all the way to mental and everything in between. They've got rap sheets, where they have to get record expungements, things like that. So there's a lot of details involved in providing those services for those women. And we've committed to going after grant dollars, which we do, to help provide those services. And then what we do, I just want to be clear, when it comes to an issue like human trafficking, millions of people being trafficked around the world, No More is not the only organization serving these people and affecting change in this space. And we can't be the only ones. We have to work well together.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're passionate about is collaborating with people that are doing the things well. So if we're going to be number 3 in the country for human trafficking, I keep saying, and I'll keep beating this drum. Why can't we be number 1 for best practices in program services? Why can't we be number 1 for best practices in education? Why can't we be number 1 in housing solutions? We can. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. And so in the mobilization part, we're really trying to help solve the housing problem and allow people from all over the place, churches, communities, businesses, to come in and support those people by doing very practical things around those properties. And we have a house right now that we're renovating in one of our counties here, and it's a 100-year-old property, that was given to us, and we're renovating the property so that we can house more women. And we've had hundreds of volunteers show up on the property that have helped bring the cost down on some of these issues. And it's been amazing to watch. And people light up because they go, oh, I can do something. When they become educated about something. And that's the thing. Like, when you become aware of something, when you become educated about something, you can't help but want to affect change with it, right? But that's where everything begins is in the education, but then they need to know what to do next. So we help people take their next right step. And it might look just as simple as showing up to a house to help do some renovation work. It might look even more deep, like delivering a meal or doing a Bible study with some of the women. I mean, it goes all different ways, but we help people take their next right step. And that's the important key, because we can't do it by ourselves. And it's important for other people to understand that they are a part of the solution and they can affect change. Number 1, for men, we got to stop doing things that aren't right. And we need to start doing things that we know we're supposed to be doing in our communities and leading well. And then number 2, it's important for everyone to understand that we all can do something. Whatever that is, we help you take your next right step in doing that.
Man, so Well, number one, such a good point that you can do something. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
can do something, right? Because I think people
Mm-hmm.
look at an issue like this, and I think, the reasonably prudent person, Christian or not, has that God morality within them, and they see this as the purest evil on earth, right? Like this is
Yeah.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
purest evil on earth. But people aren't educated in it. And the fact that you guys have put that at the forefront is I can only
Well,
applaud you for that.